Alright guys, Rob Dennis here with a video on clamp racks, clamp storage. I already recorded this once just to give you a heads up, so I kind of messed it up, so we're starting over again. See if it works out. Today I'm kind of doing a different format. My camera's been having problems. For whatever reason, it keeps eating the recordings that I have on the video cards. I have no idea why. So we're going to start in the home office today, kind of go through my process, start to finish, as I pick up these new projects, as I build out my shop on the, basically just the, steps 1 through whatever. So I always come to Google or YouTube first to get ideas from the experienced woodworkers that are on here. So, Jay, Cat Moses, those guys have all given me great advice from their videos. Obviously, I don't talk to them in person. I'm just watching the stuff that they've done, things they've learned over the years. A lot of their stuff have been on here for anywhere from 1 year. Jay Bates has a video on here right here that's 5 years old. That's where I took a lot of inspiration from. Same thing with Cat Moses. And that's what I recommend everybody do. Don't just choose whatever's got the most views. Try to put your filters on. Choose what's most recent. That way you can see what they've done a lessons learned on, what they've improved upon. Because their first video has been out longer, it probably has more views. And just kind of compare and contrast what works best for your shop. So the most common ones you see on here, right? Like you see this $10 ultimate clamp rack. You see a lot of these simple clamp racks, and they work. The issue is they take up a lot more space, and there's a lot less storage available. What I want with my shop is as much storage as possible in the smallest footprint possible. And that's what I've seen Jay Bates and Cat Moses do. That's why they changed out their entire rack systems to a different method. And that's where I took my primary process from. If you look at Jay Bates, we'll zoom in real quick. Well, actually, let's look at these simple racks, and then we'll zoom in on what we actually did, and then get into the actual video of cutting it and working in the shop. Right, so this $10 ultimate clamp rack, you can see where they cut in slits and plywood. Basically, they just stack 3 sheets of plywood, cut it to size, and then cut slits in it. That works great for C clamps, small clamps, some of the best table clamps and all. The problem is you can't store hardly anything in there. It's very specific to the clamp styles you can put in it. Very limiting. So if you're going to spend the money on the plywood, make sure you buy something that's going to last. Everything gets more expensive, it seems like, every day currently. So that would not be my recommendation unless you just have the scrap laying around and that's what you want to build. Other things I see people build are these mobile racks. April Wilkinson's got a good video. This guy's video is pretty good. If you have a large enough shop to justify a mobile rack, that's great. Or if you've got a great storage spot to move it to to get it out of the way, that's awesome. But I want everything up on the wall. That way it's easy to clean my shop, sweep the floors, and I don't have a lot of working space, so I'm trying to make as efficient use of what little space I do have. And that's why, again, we went with the Jay Bates, Cat Moses build. I don't know if they're the first ones that did it. They're the first ones I saw on here that did it. And we just, instead of doing the French cleat systems, because I didn't want to spend that much money on wood to do all that extra work, basically, I just went ahead and did the plywood version that Jay Bates did. It's very simple, and that's what we're going to jump into. Okay, so before we get too much deeper into this video, I wanted to go ahead and show the final product. So this is where we mounted it, right next to the entry door and garage door as we walk into the shop. That way it's kind of out of the way, because once we grab the clamps, shouldn't really need to go back too many more times. As you can see, we followed a pretty standard process. In the upper right hand corner, you will see a little bit of an offset. I had to trim the board back to get it to fit behind the door frame because of French cleat, it has that extra 3/4 of an inch. I accounted for exactly enough space, which is about 19 inches out from the wall. So we had to trim it down just so it would fit next to the door. It's not blocking the light switch, which I like. And as you can see, we can get plenty of clamps in here. I don't have a lot of clamps at the moment, but that's 19 inches worth of storage on every single one of those bars that we can put them in. And then I took another scrap piece of plywood and a piece of 1-inch strip, and I mounted it to the board so we can put the spring clamps on there. So a couple of speed clamps, a couple of the spring clamps. We have rust problems, dehumidification, that I need to get worked into the shop. I'm planning to buy a dehumidifier pretty soon, and that's why all my black pipe bar clamps are all rusted. I got a few more laying over on the table that I'm working on a few different rust solutions for them so I can keep getting the use out of them. Seems like the cheapest option is to buy pipe clamps in the pipe. I've got a couple of strap clamps. I've got a couple of box clamps for anything 90 degrees that I plan to make in the future. I do plan to make drawers and cabinets, so those should help, I hope. Save me some trouble trying to put it all together myself. And that's about it for the final product. And if you want to see what we came from, the original storage solution that I had was a 3/4 inch piece of conduit running between 2 scrap pieces of 2x4 that I screwed to the underside of my shelf. So we definitely had a massive upgrade from that because it was blocking the workspace of that 3-foot bench that I built and was getting in the way of the miter saw. So that's going to be taken down out of the shop, and we plan to put cabinets and drawers in place back there. That way they'll be out of the way and we still get storage solutions. As you guys know, you can't start a project without first having to go to Lowe's, Home Depot, and buy some wood. So we went there, we got some Sumauma wood. We couldn't get Baltic birch, it was a little bit too expensive for what we were trying to do, so pretty much a $10 to $20 difference. And it's a similar hardwood, so it'll work well enough, it's just not as pretty. This is the old clamp rack like we went over earlier, the conduit 3/4 inch between two pieces of 2x4, and then that's the wall space we're going to use to mount it on. And then we did a quick overview of our clamps that we just had kind of laid out on a shelf. Now as we walk up and get started, we're going to go ahead and take a measurement of the wall, make sure what our widths are going to be and our depths. So in this case we're doing about 50 inches wide and 19 inches out to the door frame. I measured height here just to make sure we're going to have enough space, or if I wanted to use a full sheet of plywood, I decided it'd be easier for me to handle on my own if I don't do a full sheet, so we're going to cut it down on the table saw. I don't recommend, now that I've done this, to cut it down on the table saw by yourself. It's a little bit difficult and unwieldy, and you'll see the process that we have to go through to get it done. And luckily we have a rolling workbench with a table saw mounted inside of it, so it's quick and easy to move it to where we can easily toss some material up on there to cut down. But I have gone ahead and got a Craig AccuCut and a rip cut so that we can do the full 48 inches or full 96 inches to trim down this wood easier and more safely. And you'll see what I'm talking about in a second as we start to slide it across the table. So put in the locks, and I go to grab a sheet of plywood to throw it up on the table, and that's when, you know, the lack of experience shows, and I realize that I don't have enough, or I don't have the ability to keep it balanced to hold it. So I grab one of my DeWalt workbenches that are foldable, and it's a little bit shorter than the workbench, so we take some of these old table legs that I was building a few years ago that I lost the plans for, and I just use them basically as holds. And then a 2x6 on either one, and we're going to screw that down just to make sure it's as stable as possible without being permanent. And this just gives us a way to balance that 4x8 sheet of plywood without having to get it necessarily bound up between the fence and the saw blade. I am happy that I made my workbench as wide as I did. So right here we're checking the fence. We just put a Vega 50 inch fence in, so I'm just trying to make sure it's going to stay accurate, since we couldn't put a rear rail on it, and it does do a pretty good job of staying accurate even with this big sheet of plywood going across. Realize I don't have it plugged in. It takes me a second to walk around and grab it, the extension cord, and get it plugged back in, turn the blade on. Something I will fix in the future is just a way to turn that saw on without having to lean under the material. And then we just try to make sure everything's nice, lined up, try and keep it tight against the fence, and then roll it across the saw. The black saw splitter that's behind the saw blade itself, you'll see it just keeps anything from kicking back at us. But we got stuck on the table just for a second. There's like a small space in it where it's not quite level with the table saw and it caught on it. But it's a lot faster for me at this point to just take my skill saw and trim it down with the Craig jigs that we have. We're going to measure it, make sure nothing moved while we were sliding it across, because I don't trust anything that I've done yet. I don't have the confidence and experience to verify or trust what I've done without verifying it. Now we've got a general idea in our head of the angles we want to take, so we're going to do 19 inches, 10 inches, and then 3 inches on either side for the support. We want to leave a little bit of material on there so that regardless of the weight we put on, especially with those black pipe clamps, that nothing's going to break. We want it to last, you know, hopefully as long as the shop lasts, unless there's a better option that comes out down the road. And just go through the habit of grabbing our measurements. We've got a couple of cheap rollers and an engineering square that we use for drawings and plans. Just making life as easy as we can instead of trying to eyeball everything, or, you know, use a level plus tape measure. Double check it because my pencil leads weren't very sharp. Some of them were broken off, so I just didn't get a good mark on the first time. We also tried to make sure that we use the same ruler or tape measure for everything from start to finish. As I'm sure you guys know, some of these carpenter tape measures and other devices are not perfectly accurate to each other. That's why a lot of people buy the Woodpecker brand of measurement tools and everything else, because they come with a lifetime guarantee and warranty. Once we start making some money out of the shop, we plan to buy better tools as we go, just to make sure we're better aligned. That way, if I have my brother or somebody else come help me, regardless of the tool that we're using in hand, they should be exactly the same in the true measurements. So we decided to just measure out the 3 inches, and then we were just going to take a straight edge between that 3-inch measurement, and that's how we're going to get our angle, instead of trying to sit there and figure out the angle perfectly on everything. Not sure why I decided to keep showing the measurements, but there they are again. 3 inches, 3 inches, 19 and 10. Probably a little bit wider than we need. If I go back and redo it, I may have just gone with 2 inches and 2 inches, or maybe 1.5 inches instead of that 3-inch mark. I believe that would have been enough to hold up the weight of these clamps. Jack comes in behind us. He doesn't like a lot of loud noise, but he likes to check in anytime it gets quiet, make sure we're doing our job and staying busy. And we don't have a actual bandsaw, so we decided to take the Jigsaw and use it. I do have some contentions with Milwaukee and that Jigsaw battery at this point. My other 2 batteries, the smaller ones that are cylinder, they had already gone bad just because I hadn't charged them in so long. But this battery was brand new, and during the making of these shelves, it stopped wanting to charge. So I'm going to have to call them, see what I can do about that. It also took out 2 of my chargers, which I've never had that happen before. Hopefully we can get it resolved and get back in line. I've got a couple more chargers. As you guys know, I guess I'm a little bit of a Milwaukee fanboy, but it's just the brand I decided to go with whenever I was working out of my truck. Realized I don't have a good way to get the Jigsaw in there, so I decided to drill a hole in the wood. That way we have a place to put the blade in. I don't do a good job of this. You'll see later that it leaves a little bit of a notch at the end of it. And there we go. We have our master, and then we've got our template. We're going to make sure that we use the same master template for every one of them. That way, as we mark our pencil line, it should stay relatively the same. And we're just going to sit here and try to figure out the best way to lay the board down without having as much waste. I know Jay Bates and a few other woodworkers on YouTube, they like to build all this out in software first. I don't have the software right now to do that, and trying to teach myself new software while teaching myself woodworking didn't seem like the best idea. We'll figure out the software down the road once we get a little bit more advanced and past all the little basic techniques that we need to know. Try to wear a dust mask as much as possible, especially this Sumauma Brazilian hardwood. For whatever reason, it was really irritating my nose, so I'm not sure if Baltic Birch would be the same or not. I haven't used the Baltic Birch yet. I used redwood for the miter saw station, and that didn't really bother me. But I know a lot of people, warn about having good dust collection, good ventilation, and proper dust masks. So we're going to probably upgrade our dust mask, and we'll do a video on our dust collection that we finally finished. So here's the final product where we just kind of stacked them up to show how similar they all are. You see the notch in the one. And a lot of those little spots that you see, I don't know why, but every time there's like a knot or something, it's like they drilled out a little hole in it and then put a dab of glue or something in there. And that's why you see all those little white dots everywhere where there's dark spots. So what we're doing now is we're cutting a spacer. That way we don't have to sit there and measure every one of the brackets to get them properly aligned. And we're just going to do a 2-inch by 10-inch. That way it can sit there properly, right? So 10 inches is the height of the shell, or the angled pieces, and we want to make sure we're the same height so that we can set it on the board. We clamped it to the table and put a 2x600 because it just happened to work out to where that would put it level with the top of the board, the backer board. Not the safest way to do this, so I don't recommend doing it, but works for me. And you'll see I hold up the wood exactly 2 inches and exactly 10 inches. That way we have that spacer block again just to save time. Makes life easy, keeps everything the same. So we'll head back to the workbench. You see where I've got the 2x6 set up. I've got the backer board clamped to the workbench. and I pre-deployed all of my pieces just to kind of get an idea of how it's going to lay out and look. I've also realized at this point that I'm going to have to go cut more, that I didn't make quite enough to fill that entire 4-foot piece, well, 50-inch piece. And then we're just going to start on the ends to make sure we get everything as square as possible. A lot of this I eyeballed and just used my finger to hold it flush, so that worked out pretty well. Probably overdid on the glue some. Again, Novice Wood Worker, so you'll just see a whole bunch of squeeze out. I did get these brushes from Rockler. Bought them when I ordered some air hoses for the dust collection. That way I don't have to keep, rubbing my finger across everything and wiping it off on my pants or whatever else. Realized here that I didn't turn on the brad nailer. And once we started putting the nails in, even though it was on the highest setting, it still wasn't driving them all the way through the hardwood. But it'll work well enough to hold it in place. Try to wipe up as much of the squeeze out as we possibly can. We just don't want a bunch of glue sitting everywhere. We use Titbond Premium for everything. No idea if that's the best wood or not. That's just what we had on hand from other projects. And it's held up pretty well for the other stations and things that we've built. I'm right-handed by nature, a little awkward with my left hand, but we still managed to get it in there. And I was having some trouble eyeballing this and leveling it out to where I wouldn't have the screws and nails miss out, and you'll see in a second where I make a mistake. Alright, so the nails are sticking out a little bit. We'll just take a hammer and bang those in. Didn't miss anything, didn't have any nails pop out. A little bit of squeeze out we'll wipe up with a paper towel. So here we are going back with the hammer, making sure it's flush. Grab a couple of wood screws, and we're just going to put 3 screws into every one of these. That way it'll help the glue cure, acting as a clamp, and we won't have to worry about any weight issues. Probably should have pre-drilled these holes in all honesty, just to make sure that nothing split and broke loose. This right here where I back the screw back out, I realized that I have missed the board a little bit. I caught it just on the edge, so there's a little bit of a tear out that we have to go in, and we just took some glue, put it under the tear out, and then pushed it down with our finger, and it worked fine. But right here you see on the camera where I show you my mistake. No reason to hide it. But a little bit of glue on it, and you'll never see it. Plus it's just part of the shop, so breaking things is always good. Like I said, we realized we didn't have quite enough pieces to fill it from end to end. And also to help with the tear out, what we did is we took our small level, our little speed level right there, the yellow one, and we used it to align everything. So once everything was nice and perfectly level, we could use that to basically size the board and make sure that our screws were going to line up so we wouldn't have any more tear out problems. We took the large level, the 4-foot one, because we made some smaller shelves to hold our F clamps, our speed clamps that were too small to go into the larger ones. Using the same spacing bracket. And it doesn't look like it's perfectly level, but if you look at the bubble it is. The reason there's a gap between the arms is because the way I clamped that level, it's just at a little bit of an angle. Where the bottom's pulling out. So we checked the level top to bottom again. Like I said, we're using that small level to make sure we don't miss and have any more tear out problems. And from here it's pretty much smooth sailing. Now we get to the final product. We've got it hung, French cleat on the back. I did record that, but we lost it. Like I said, my camera was eating the cards for some reason. We had to trim the one piece in the upper right hand corner, like I said. The arm's just a little bit shorter now to make sure it would fit between the door frame. We made the box to hold the corner box squares and the framing squares. And then we made a little 1-inch piece of trim with plywood to hold the spring clamps. This will be an easily expandable board so that we can add more clamps in the future. I feel like it holds everything nice and neat. Keeps it at eye level where we can find what we need. Look at the bottom, and this is all made out of scrap wood, so that's why it's not perfectly square, but it's close. And that's pretty much it.